As many of you may know, vitamin D is essential for optimal blood sugar and insulin sensitivity. Vitamin D also helps to lower inflammation, it's amazing for our immune system, and it is just so important for our metabolic and overall health. But vitamin D is not something that's easily found in a lot of foods. It's found in cod liver oil. I don't see a lot of people eating that. And it is found in some dairy products and also some lard, but it's not really in a lot of foods. Some foods are fortified with vitamin D, but this is the wrong form of vitamin D. It's D2, not D3. And so it's really hard to get vitamin D, all that we need from food. So we think, well, we should just supplement, right? Not so fast. Our guest today is going to explain why vitamin D supplementation is actually harmful and how it can lead to a lot of challenges, including a very common autoimmune disease that we see a lot of nowadays, and why we need to stop taking these supplements before we get a lab test to find out how much vitamin D is actually in our blood, because the vitamin D supplements, they stay in our body for a really long time. So where do we get vitamin D? We get it from the sun. But the message out there is the sun is going to kill you, the sun is going to give you cancer. And if we go in the sun inappropriately or we avoid it altogether, we're going to have problems. But as early humans, we lived outside. We evolved as humans outside and we evolved with the sun. And so in this episode, my guest today, Heathar Shepard, and I are going to talk all about how to expose ourselves to all these important rays of the sun so we can actually get a safe exposure to the sun to absorb UVB light, which makes vitamin D. So we're going to learn how to safely and appropriately get vitamin D to up-level so many aspects of our health. And also the sun has an exorbitant amount of benefits. And it is so essential that we are exposing ourselves appropriately to these sun's rays so that we can up-level every single aspect of our health. So I'm so excited. This episode was so good. We talked about meal timing. We talked about when to fast. We talked about how long to be outside at different times of the day. We talked about different apps you can download to help you on this journey. And this idea that I was just in Costa Rica, I just got back yesterday, and I didn't use sunscreen the entire time I was there. In the past, I would have been using sunscreen, I would have been using sunglasses, but I didn't use those. And as you can see, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm not burned at all. I have a nice tan. It actually, like, not even super tan, but I was outside a lot of the time, but used the sun in a really healthy, appropriate way. And we are going to teach you how to do that in today's episode. You are going to love this one. I loved it so much. Please welcome my guest, Heathar Shepard. Heathar, thanks so much for being here on the Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast with us.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I saw your page actually because I was looking up, I'm like, I need to invent some sort of like a sunlight diet, something. And I look it up and you already, you all had already invented it. And I loved your page. It's called Sunlight RX. And this concept of thinking about sunlight as a prescription, as that important that we need it. This is medicine. So I would love to start before we dive into sunlight. Maybe your story will take us there, but I'd love to just hear how you came to find how important sunlight is for our health and kind of step into this more like quantum circadian type ancestral health that you're working on.
Awesome. I wish I would have found it sooner, to be honest. It would have been really great, but that's okay. You know, it happened at when it was supposed to happen. But I grew up in upstate New York, and I remember that my friends and I would always like compare like who has the best tan growing up, and my mom's Sicilian, and so naturally I have a little bit higher of a Fitzpatrick, you know, slightly, but I'd be like, I'd always win. I was like, yes, this is amazing. And like looking back now, I know why that was not just an aesthetic thing for me and my friends, but it was actually had a lot of health implications. And I learned that later in my 20s when I got in a really bad car accident and had a TBI. And so since then, or at that point in time, I'd went from training professional athletes, playing Division I basketball, like very much being in that world, and then had this TBI, and it, like, this car crash happened in seconds, and my life changed in seconds. Like, after that, I could no longer be like physically active in the way I once was, because I would have so many symptoms from the TBI, headaches, dizziness, fatigue. It created
Brain
just
fog.
a boatload of issues. So, so since that time, I had tried, like, okay, how do I heal this thing? Like, how do I rectify these symptoms from a root place? And so I tried all the things. I tried literally everything. Like, my MRIs were clear, all the CAT scan, like, they're like, you're fine, Heather. Go back to training athletes. Go back to, like, lifting all the weights you used to lift. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't track though. That doesn't, like, my body's not, literally, I can't do that without, like, being in bed for a week. So I tried chiropractic. I went to acupuncture school because one acupuncture session, like, I finally, I was like, oh my God, I don't have a headache for like a day. I'm going to go study this thing. And, so the trajectory of my life changed in a big way, from like physically active sports person to more of like this holistic healing approach. So for 10 years, I tried every single thing you could think of, and I'd get relief for maybe an hour or a day. And then it'd be like, oh, here are my symptoms again. Dang it, that didn't work. Um, and one day, I heard a podcast, I believe it was by Jack Kruse, and I was like, oh, I mean, sure, I'll watch. I'll go outside in the sun. Why not? I mean, it's not gonna hurt. I've tried everything, so whatever. And I didn't really have high hopes. I was just like, I need some more sun. I work online at that point in my life. Let's do it. So I started to watch the sunrise, and I was out for a hefty amount of time, and we can get into this about the therapeutic benefits of sunlight. It takes more than 10 minutes of being out in the sun. So I stayed out for a while, and I'm self-employed. So I was like, I could create my own schedule. I could go out and do this, and, let's try it. So I started to do it, and I was literally like, wait, this is, like, I was sleeping better. I had more energy. I wasn't getting headaches. And, so my wife was like, oh, let me try, like, let me do this. And like, she wasn't depressed anymore. She felt way better with her mental health. And so we were doing this together, and I was like, okay, there's something to this. And I started to piece together the different solar spectrums and what they were doing and how I was healing. And that's how my sunlight healing journey began, is just kind of this, like, whatever, I've tried everything, like, sure, why not? And it turned out to be one of the biggest assets to my health and healing my TBI and managing my blood sugar levels, which is a huge genetic predisposition for me and my family. So that's kind of how it got started.
Yeah. Wow. Such a crazy story. And I'm so glad that you have since healed your TBI. In another lifetime, I was a speech therapist and did work with some people with TBIs, and it's not easy. There's so much residual inflammation, even if these scans aren't picking up on it. So
Yeah.
let's let's start with why did that help? Why is that important? Why is the sunrise? Why is everybody talking about the sunrise? Let's start there.
Yeah, I'm glad more people are talking about it now. It's really awesome. I think it's gonna support a lot of people. But um, I know you're from New York, and like, naturally people there, they would be like, oh, I'm just gonna snowbird and go to Florida. And I think we did these things without knowing why. But now we have this context as to, and this information as to why it's so beneficial. Um, but literally, huge things happen on a physiological level when we're in the sun. And there are so many things that unfold just by being in the sun with regard to our hormone signaling, our metabolic signaling, our cortisol release patterns, our melatonin release. And it starts by watching the sunrise. And when you go out and you're like, hey, I just listened to this podcast with Heather, and here we are. And so, sure, let me just try to go out in the sunrise. Like, do what I did. Like, just like, it's like not going to work. You just try it, right? But what happens is when you go out there, your eyes are looking at the sun or in the direction of the sun. And this immediately triggers the release of cortisol from your anterior pituitary gland. And it happens in like you turn a faucet on, but it's just like a trickle. And it starts to trickle out, the cortisol starts to trickle out of your brainstem and into your bloodstream. And that's how it's supposed to work. We don't want to like flood cortisol into our bloodstream with like, bulletproofing or, fasting through breakfast or looking at your iPhone, for a long, before you go outside or that sort of thing. Those practices will totally flood your bloodstream with cortisol. Whereas when you go out and you watch the sunrise, you get this like trickle effect. And as the sun moves closer to its apex, you're outside for some of that time, your body will gradually release more and more and more and more cortisol in this direction, right? And if like that's the only thing you do for your health, that's going to be doing a lot for your health. It's like so much simpler than we've been led to believe. And that's probably the biggest thing that happens at sunrise. And your body also, when it sees the sun, it's like, okay, pause melatonin release. Melatonin and cortisol should not be being released at the same time. They have an inverse relationship. And so that's a key signal that most modern people, just that signal, the melatonin cortisol release, most people don't get that right. I didn't get that right for so many years. It was like, we've just been trained out of it. We've been trained to do the indoor thing and not go outside. And, so that's a huge shift that happens just by watching the sunrise.
Yeah. Such a perfect way to start our day, because that's how we would have started our day, because as early humans we lived outside. So we were
Yeah.
always outside, and isn't it funny that our whole system is designed to be sort of triggered and the timing set off by this stimulus of the light from the sun. So we are, as you mentioned, we can artificially turn on that same stimulus, but in like a more abrupt way, by looking at our phone, by flipping on overhead lights, by opening up the refrigerator, unless yours looks like mine and has red lights. I mean, red tape over the white light bulbs inside. But we can be accidentally flooding our system with cortisol, and we are stressed out as a society. We don't need giant bursts of cortisol in the morning. That's like the exact opposite way that I want to start my day. And yes, the cortisol does turn off the melatonin, so we can stop. We don't have that like sort of sleep inertia where we're like dragging all morning. So, but that gradual rise of the sun, it's very dim at first, right? It's a nice slow increase, and that's exactly what our body needs. So before we dive into more timing of the sun, I wanted to then say, because that's a great time to start thinking about eating, because you mentioned we don't want to be skipping breakfast. We don't want to be just having a bulletproof coffee, because again, this is going to drive up that cortisol. So can you talk about what we should do instead? What would be a better practice?
Yeah, it's such a good question, because for so many years we've been taught that, skip breakfast and bulletproof. And, I'm just saying the person who invented that was a male, and men tend to do better, like not better, but they have a different hormone system than women do. And so they can get away with more practices like that for a longer period of time without having, negative effects. Women tend to not be, we don't have that, we can birth a babies. So that's, our hormones are totally different. That being said, if you're a man and you're listening to this, you shouldn't skip breakfast. Okay. Like, I just want to mention that. But optimally, ideally, from a physiological standpoint, we want to get up and watch the sunrise and then come in and make breakfast. And ideally, if it's nice outside, we want to eat that breakfast outside, And so this is all within like 60-ish minutes of after you wake up. And this further sets your circadian rhythm. This further supports your cortisol release and your insulin release. Like, you don't want your blood sugar to go so many hours without eating. That is going to be really hard on your hormones, on your blood sugar levels. It sets this, it's a recipe for disaster, to be honest. So ideally, we want to get up in the morning, we want to watch the sunrise, and then we want to come in and make, or if you have an outdoor, whatever, you want to make breakfast and eat a really good high protein breakfast after your sunrise practice. That would be an ideal thing. And if we think about it, farmers, because most people used to farm and only like 1% of people farm now, learned so much about farming this year because I've taken on that skill. But they would go outside and take care of their animals and feed their animals and then come in and eat. And so we naturally had this sort of rhythm. And then after World War II, nobody wanted to farm anymore. We all wanted to do other things, which is fine, but it totally messed with this rhythm. The focus got away from like tending to the household, tending to our nourishing needs, to let's be productive in the world. And, not that we have to have one or the other, but there was this disconnect that happened around that time. And so now we have to reconnect. And even if you don't own a farm, just go out and watch the sunrise and then, have your breakfast. That would be so ideal for your health.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I find that a lot of my clients, once they started seeing sunrise, a lot of them who have this dawn phenomenon where their blood sugar is going high in the morning, it starts to come down.
Yeah.
And that, you want to tell us why that is? Why the sunlight is doing that to our blood sugar?
Oh man. Well, okay. So, for one, cortisol plays a big role because you're starting your cortisol release, you're decreasing your inflammation levels, and by watching the sunrise, you're stimulating metabolic signals. And this is getting your, we hear about circadian rhythms, but this is literally getting your natural rhythms in sync with nature.
Yep.
And so eating is another way, and eating in certain times of the day is another way we can support our circadian rhythms. Yes. And the worst thing you can do is skip breakfast. So just by eating breakfast, and we can talk about what that looks like if you want, but does wonders for your blood sugar, for your hormones, and yeah. I'm not sure if I did that,
Yeah. No, I was just sort of referring to, that's all correct. And I agree. And what I was referring to is that there's so much red light in the sunrise light, and red light makes our mitochondria utilize glucose faster and more efficiently. And so we start to see that instead of that, like you said, that giant cortisol spike because we're flipping on overhead lights. That's
Yes.
giving us this big blood sugar spike because cortisol is a glucocorticoid hormone. It makes our liver produce glucose. So we
Yes.
get, if we're jacking up our cortisol, we're going to see either right in the moment that sort of spike of the dawn phenomenon. And what I see commonly with people is that these high cortisol habits that they have lead to chronically elevated blood sugar levels. But when we can go outside in the morning, we watch sunrise, you will probably find that high peak of blood sugar starts going down because of all that red light, and then we're eating. And that's the time of the day that we're best set to metabolize our food. And so as we go throughout the day, the blood sugar response to meals gets worse. And it's actually worse if we skip breakfast. So that's another reason not to skip breakfast, because our blood sugar response to the following meals will be worse. So, yeah, do you want to dive in and talk about what we could be eating at that time for breakfast? You mentioned high protein.
Yeah, sure. Well said. The red light is so huge, and I just want to take a minute to emphasize there that red light in sunlight is very, and I may be, the odd one out here, but red light from sunlight is very different from a red light panel or singling out red light, because you have so many different light frequencies in sunlight. At sunrise you have red light and you have blue light, and we're taught that all blue light is bad, but it's not.
No.
Blue light from sunlight is so important for our cortisol release, and what you were just explaining with regard to metabolism and blood sugar and so forth. So when we single any light frequency out, it is my sense that's when we start to get issues. Like all of our devices are predominantly blue light. And, so then we're predominantly looking at that form of light versus sunlight. You have this blend of color temperatures, and
That are
that's
always
energy.
changing.
Exactly. They're always changing, and different times of the day they're changing. And as they change, you're getting different physiological signals when you're out in sunlight. And so, yeah, I think that's really important to note, because people might hear this and they're like, oh, let me get a red light panel and I don't have to go outside and watch the sunlight and I can just eat my breakfast and sit here. And it's like, probably, better than not doing, maybe better than not going, than looking at your computer, but it's not the same. Um,
Yeah.
and I really want to emphasize that.
Nothing can replace the sun. No vitamin D,
Yeah.
like capsule, no red light therapy panel. These are things that I feel that we have created to mitigate negative side effects of our modern living. And then sometimes, a red light therapy panel can be used therapeutically. However, the most therapeutic of all would be the source of it all, which is the sun, right? Would you agree?
1,000,000%.
Yeah.
Million. You
Yeah.
can't replace it. There's no like man-made human thing or light or frequency that can give you the same effect. It's
Right.
totally impossible. So
Yeah.
I think that's important to know. And
Yeah.
you know, so let's say you've gotten your sunrise on and you've been out there and you come in and you're ready for breakfast, and um, a really what I encourage to my clients is try not to eat carbs at breakfast, to further support your blood sugar levels. Wait till you have built up more sunlight exposure throughout the day. The more and more you build up, the better equipped you're going to be for absorbing, assimilating carbohydrates. And there's a whole seasonal context to that as well, and when you should be eating them and what kinds and what forms and so forth. And
You want to
so
talk about that?
yeah, I'd love to share
Yeah,
with you.
yeah, please. Don't, yeah, go into detail. I would love to talk to that because people are like, "Wait, what do you mean?"
Yeah,
So, yeah, let's do that.
I'm happy to. So really, if we just think about this whole episode as forget what humans say and just mimic nature, we're gonna have a lot more success with our health. And this is another thing that's gotten lost and forgotten along the way when there was that split after World War II. It's like, we're not farming anymore. We're going out into the world and we have all these like industrial produced food. So over time, and it didn't take that much time, we seem to have forgotten, and I had forgotten myself, that sunlight grows our food. And so when we eat certain foods outside of seasonal context, that's going to have an effect on the way our body absorbs, assimilates, utilizes that food. And certain foods we do much better with during certain seasons. And we've like gone on board with like all these diets and like these diet trends, and I am like, I right here, I've done it. Yes, 100%, all the way. And then it's like, wait, this is total horseshit. I'm sorry if you don't swear in you can cut that out if you need to. It's like, wait a minute, what does nature do? Nature grows these foods in summer. Oh my gosh, they should be eaten in summertime. Nature doesn't grow many foods unless you live in the subtropics or tropics. In the winter, what do we have? We don't have much. We have foods that can store well. We have meats, we have fat, we have those sort of things. And so if we listen to what nature is doing and we watch and we observe, it's like, that's the diet that we need to be focusing on, that way of eating, whatever sunlight can grow, and the sunlight that you're in, you know, and we can go into that however way you'd like.
Yeah. So the idea, just to sort of sum up, that we are also getting light through our food because the light grows the food. And so we're talking about sort of harmonizing our bodies, our rhythms to the rhythms of nature, and being outside when there's this light, and that's information for my body of what hormones to produce, what genes to turn on and off, what to do at what time. So then we're taking in food that also has light information in it.
Yes.
And because of our modern industrial global food landscape, we are able to eat mangoes in January in upstate New York. And
Absolutely.
but even though that mango could not grow there. So we're eating these foods that are completely inappropriate for the context
Yeah.
of what we're doing. And then there's ultra processed foods, which are also made with things like wheat and corn and rice and these, factory made oils that would never be exist in that place at that time. And it's so much energy and it's so much light that is totally a mismatch for the dark, gloomy, low light kind of day that we're experiencing outside.
Yeah.
So when our body takes this in, it's like confusion and chaos,
Yeah.
which leads to inflammation, right? Like, you want to expand on that?
Yeah, for sure. That was awesome, and that's exactly what happens. And we have the amenity of grocery stores, and it's also a huge crutch. It's a real it's also a detriment that fuels this issue, because just like you're saying, no matter where you live, especially in the States, you can go into a grocery store any time of year and the same shit is on the shelf all year round. Who knows what's in season anymore, because we've totally been trained out of knowing what can grow at what time of year.
Yeah.
And we have to get back in touch with this. And this is going to vary depending on where you live, which is why a one diet fits all approach is absolute utter crap. It's like total crap. Just, it's not going to be very supportive. We have to eat according to our geographical location to support our mitochondrial health, to keep inflammation levels low, to support our blood sugar levels. Like, for example, UVB light is only available in certain places in northerly latitudes for part of the year in the summer months. It's available all the time in tropical areas and some subtropical areas. That's where like fruit you can go, and it's some sort of fruit growing all year long, and nightshades and so forth, and everybody wants to blame the food. Oh, it's the nightshades. Oh, there's too much, it's the fruit. It's
It's the
but
lectins. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I love
Mhm.
it. It's like we blame it on all those things. But honestly, if we just eat within seasonal context while we ourselves are outside in that sunlight, then we're going to benefit much more from diet, this approach to diet. And going back to UVB light is what grows fruit, most of our vegetables, especially the ones that perish really easily and quick, like lettuces and so forth, tomatoes, the nightshades. And UVB light, when it goes away, these foods go away in nature. They stop growing. And there's a really interesting connection between the gut microbiome and light. And this isn't talked about too often. And I have no idea what the science says about it because I'm not big on what science says, to be honest. I'm sorry that most of it's heavily funded. But if we just look at nature
And it's done under
and
blue lights.
from some of the firsthand studies, yeah, it's done under blue light or fake UVB light, right?
Yeah.
With a whole other
Sorry, I didn't
but
mean to interrupt you there. Go ahead.
no, it's good,
Yeah.
So, but the thing is that UVB light stimulates when we're outside and we're in that light and it's hitting our skin and our eyes and so forth. That we've all heard of the gut-brain axis. And so when you're outside in sunlight and UVB light is present, it stimulates the production of a totally different set of beneficial gut bacteria than in the winter months when UVB light goes away. And those bacteria that UVB stimulates actually helps to improve the way you absorb, assimilate, and utilize fruits and more simple carbohydrates and like honey and these sort of things. So when that light goes away in the winter, you have lost this whole probiotic, so to speak, that allows you to process these foods. And so what happens? People gain weight in the winter because I don't understand. I'm eating the same thing. I'm doing this. I'm getting my fruits and vegetables in. You probably shouldn't be getting too many fruits and vegetables in the winter if you don't have UVB because you've just lost this ability to utilize the simple sugars and nutrients in that food because the sunlight has shifted. And that's what we don't understand right there.
Yeah. That's so good. That is such important information. So the idea that our gut bacteria is totally different when it's in these summer months when there's UVB around, and that better equips us to digest and metabolize these simple sugars that are in these foods that grow only with the UVB light. So, and we didn't even talk about deuterium, but yeah, that's a whole other piece of this. But yeah, that in and of itself is just such helpful information to know that if you can Google what is growing in your area and see, it's going to be really enlightening for, our friends up north in Canada or like people in Minnesota in the middle of winter. They're going to be like, well, nothing's growing here. It's like, well, a carnivore diet is looking better and better, right? It's
Yeah.
just more biologically appropriate at that time. I'm not saying everyone needs to be 100% carnivore in the winter. That's not what it is. But eating as close to what is growing in your latitude is going to be, you're going to get the most benefit for your health because it's not confusing your body. It's not this chaotic signal where it's like, okay, I just looked outside and I really thought that it was 2 p.m. on December 20th, but now you open your phone and now it feels like July 15th. And then I just ate something and it feels like August 23rd. So it's like our body is just getting so confused, and that confusion is chaos, and that equates to inflammation, which we know is at the root of everything. So, okay, so that's super helpful in terms of what to eat. And when we talked about we need to eat breakfast, we want to eat a high protein breakfast. Fat is always great to add because that's our other energy source as opposed to carbs.
Yes.
So, and then you mentioned not eating carbs first thing in the morning. So that could be another strategy we use. I personally digest and metabolize carbs the best in the morning. My blood sugar response is like nothing,
Perfect.
but I don't always eat them in the morning. So it's, it depends on what's growing. And it depends on how I'm feeling, how active I am that day. So,
Yeah.
did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point is that, you know, there's not a one size fits all. So just because like I don't eat that many carbs in the morning and do amazing with it, and you know, some of the people I work with do, doesn't mean that's going to work for you. Like, you know, for example, you do amazing with carbs. Like I really encourage people to listen to their body, because there's so much information out there and we can get really dogmatic and be like, Heather said this or Danielle said this. And it's like, yeah, take this into your, like, take it in, maybe experiment with it,
Yes.
and, you know, always go with nature for what, you know, that's, you know, that's
Look to
not,
nature. Yeah.
look to nature. It's not like a question there. But when it comes to some of these, like, nuances, like don't eat carbs in the morning, you know, you try it out for yourself. It works for me and it works for you differently. And that's amazing. And I think that's a huge area where people get totally lost in these days because they're like, this person said this, and then we do it and it doesn't work. And we're like, you know, pissed off.
Yeah.
Or we're like, you
Yeah.
know,
Or like, oh, let's just throw out everything this person said. It's like, just
yeah,
we need to figure out what works for us. And so I love that you're talking about this. And as your body is more in sync with nature, you're going to be able to trust what it's telling you so much more than if you're like inside all the time, eating processed food all day. Your body's going to tell you, yeah, keep going with those Snickers bars, like that's going to be what your body's telling you. But once you get really dialed in, I have someone who follows me on Instagram, and she's like, Danny, I have to tell you, I've been watching the sunrise and doing UVA, which we'll talk about next. And I stopped feeling so dependent on carbs, and my blood sugar stopped crashing. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, I'm like, I have been waiting for messages like this because I work with a lot of people with hypoglycemia.
uh-huh,
And I'm like, I'm just waiting for them to regulate their hormonal systems, their metabolism, get the T3 and T4 coming, and all these, like, just the regulation of what needs to happen at what time, get
yeah,
all this stuff synced up as it's supposed to work. And wouldn't you know, the symptoms start going away. So
yeah,
it's like we have to, instead of, I was thinking when I was in Costa Rica eating all the tropical fruits because it
oh
was
yeah,
very appropriate for me too, and I was enjoying every minute of that. Um,
yes,
I was like, we need to be putting our bodies into the medicine. Like the medicine goes in our bodies. That's the food. We know food is medicine, but we also need to put our bodies into the medicine, which is nature, and
yeah,
it starts to regulate. Like it's just such a simple concept that we're overlooking it. We're like, no, no, no. I need a tech, I need a device. I need like this biohacking thing. It needs to be complicated. It's like
yes.
this makes it so much easier. It just makes everything you're doing work so much better, and it makes it just so much more simplified.
And it literally, we make things way too hard and we get too dogmatic and we try way too many things when it comes to our health, which I did for 10 years until I discovered sunlight and a couple other things. But it's like a lot of people today are doing way too much. And we have to simplify and focus on what's actually going to get us to our goal versus like this genetic test and this facility and clinic and this and with all
And these
these detox,
supplements
blah,
and
blah, blah.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
like
like,
overwhelming.
no, it's not, that's your body. It's overwhelmed by that. It
Yeah.
can't process all of that. Can't even use the shit that's in the supplements. Like just, you know, it's
Yeah.
save your money. And if you want, go to Costa Rica and get some sunlight or wherever you live. Just
Yeah.
start going outside. We all have sunlight, and um, it'll be much bigger bang for your buck when it comes to your health.
Absolutely. So we talked about in the morning, waking up, sunrise is going to be the first light that we get in our eyes through naked eyes, no contacts, no glasses, no windows. Please don't hurt yourself. And then we talked about eating breakfast and how important breakfast is. And then there's another amazing period of the sun that I cannot get over. It's like if I had to pick a favorite time of the day, this is my favorite time of the day. So, can you
Okay.
talk to us about UVA light?
Oh yeah, UVA it is awesome. I mean, you should be stoked.
It's just so cool. Like, I feel like a kid on Christmas morning with like learning about this information. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I totally get it. Um, UVA is is a powerhouse because it does so many amazing things with regard to dopamine production, serotonin production, active thyroid hormone production, and then it does this amazing thing where it recycles and replenishes your melatonin stores. And everybody thinks of melatonin as, oh, it's nighttime and it's going to be released. And yes, it will. But guess what? You have to replenish those stores. And it doesn't just happen, for the fun of it. You have to go outside in UVA light to replenish those stores. And so your brain stores up all of that melatonin in UVA light, and then you get that signal at sunset. Here we go. We're moving towards the darkness. No more cortisol. We're getting ready to switch to melatonin, but you have to restore in UVA light. I can't tell you how many people I've worked with and they just like they did sunrise, UVA, and they started sleeping better.
Same.
I'm like,
It
I
happens all
know,
the
it's
time
not
in my
that hard.
programs. They're
Like
like, I'm
it's
dreaming
like
again. Like, yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
That's why,
yeah.
because of melatonin.
Yes. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. So we get incredible brain chemicals. So we get the dopamine, serotonin, all these things that make us feel happy and motivated and energized and focused, and the endorphins. So it almost sounds as if we were built to get addicted to the sun. Would you say?
1,000,000%.
Yeah.
A million, and it's if there was a good addiction, I would say that would be it because of all of the you get the addiction with health benefits.
Yeah. Yes.
It's a friend with benefits. So but it's really it's very supportive also to your gut microbiome because a lot of what happens in UVA light um, triggers the the gut brain axis and what occurs there, and the gut microbiome, like serotonin. It's biggest productions in the gut, but guess what? We need the stimulus for it to get from light for it to get down to the gut microbiome.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's massive. It's the best antidepressant, anti-anxiety, medication there is.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that I just found so fascinating that I learned recently is that, like, the paradigm in which I was taught is biochemistry. And so it's about, like, oh, do you have these precursors to these hormones? And do you have the nutrients to make these things? And carbs and fats and proteins. And those are all great and important. But if you don't have the light stimulus to tell your body to release these hormones, you could have all the precursors in the world, but you are not getting that hormone release. And it's just like it blew my mind because it's like all this time it's like I'm eating really well, I'm doing all these things, but I wasn't getting outside in UVA light.
Right?
Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wasn't. So it's so weird to think that our indoor lifestyle, it is putting a shield. It is shielding us from nature when we need to be in the nature, in order for these things to happen.
Yes, absolutely. It's like, yeah, in order to get the most out of your diet, in order to get the most out of, for your health, out of your health, you have to have this stimulus from sunlight. Without that, there's going to be, you know, disappointment, just like I experienced with my TBI. Like, oh, that worked for a little bit, and now I'm back. And there's some
Yeah.
other things that reasons besides sunlight deficiency that could cause that, but it's a huge one. Sunlight
Yeah.
deficiency is a huge huge causative factor in all of the health issues that we experience today.
Yeah, and I read on your blog that sunlight, we need to think about it as a nutrient. And
Yes.
it's not just the sun, like we said, is always changing, and there's all different types of light that we can't see that's available at different times of the day. So this
Yeah.
idea of just like stepping outside of the day for, 1 minute, we're missing the whole spectrum, right? It's
Yeah.
like we can't synthesize it into one thing because we need to consume it as like it in its entirety. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about, because it's very relevant to me, I just got back from Costa Rica yesterday, and I did share this a little on my Instagram, but I did not use sunscreen the entire time I was there. And I also didn't use any sunglasses. And I went on a live on Instagram, and I was just talking about how, vitamin D is such a huge deficiency in our country. And
Yeah.
we cannot supplement with vitamin D and expect that we're going to get all the same benefits as in the sun, but we're deficient in D, which is impacting our blood sugar and insulin in a big, big way. And the only way to really get sufficient vitamin D levels is through the next stage of the sun, which is UVB light, which you already started talking to us about. So, can you talk about this UVB light and how to safely expose ourselves to it?
Yes. Now this is my favorite light frequency.
Okay.
It's my favorite because when UVB is ear spring in our area, and we've had UVB for a while because I live at 8,000 feet. So, it puts us closer to the sun.
Ah.
So, so we started getting it in February. Now this will vary depending on where you are. Costa Rica all year round, forget it. You don't have to question it. There
Mhm.
it is. Okay. Florida all year round, and it'll vary depending if you're the southern or northern part of the state. For example, New York, nah, forget it. I don't even think they have UVB yet. It'll be a minute.
Yeah.
So, so you see how it varies, and our diet needs to vary according to this as well, because it's going to influence how we process certain foods. And so here it is. Let's say it's in your area. It's showing up, and most people are under the misconception that if they go out at sunrise, they're making vitamin D.
Hmm.
You're not making vitamin D unless UVB light is present. You need the first two frequencies. You need exposure to them. You need exposure to sunrise light, and you need exposure to UVB light in order
UVA.
to, UVA light, in order to be able to absorb and utilize UVB light. So this whole story is building over time as the sun is moving closer and closer to its apex, okay? And what happens is your cells take in the red light, they take in the trickle of blue light that's happening with the cortisol release, and you're gradually building up towards this UVB exposure. Your body's prepping. Because if you were to just go outside on your lunch break at noon and UVB was there and you're of a lower Fitzpatrick, you're going to burn. And so then everyone's like, UVB is bad. I get a sunburn. We're not utilizing the sun or exposing ourselves to the sun in the correct way. We're not supposed to just go out at noon on our lunch hour and get in the sun. Even if you work a 9 to 5, you can, get some time in the sun, and that's really important, because if you don't have those exposure in those first two frequencies, then UVB, you're going to have the issues that all of the nonsense, tells the, industry tells us we're going to experience from UVB.
Yep.
Sure. If you don't pre-program your cells with morning sunlight and with UVA light, UVB is going to be a shit show for you. It's just how it's going to go, especially if you're a lower Fitzpatrick. You'll burn, you'll get overheated, you'll get a migraine, all of that story. And so we do it and we're like, see, right? Because we just go out and we're like, oh, they told me. But what they didn't tell us is that if we go out in the morning, and the longer we're able to be in these frequencies, the longer we're in sunrise, the longer we're in UVA, You get to UVB, and it's like you've just put like a natural sunscreen on your body, which is red light
Mm-hmm.
and blue light, that when you get to UVB, it's like, oh, now I'm actually absorbing that light. I'm not burning. I'm tanning. I have more freckles. If you're of a lower Fitzpatrick, freckles are like a UVB storage tank. As you get more UVB light, you develop freckles because your body stores that light, because it's like, hey, this UVB is going to go away. I'm going to need to pull on those stores when UVB goes away. And so our freckles go away, in the winter, because your body stores that light and then uses it in the winter. And it's like ingenious, right?
That's so cool. So it does
Yeah,
that with freckles and like with the melanin from the tan, yeah?
exactly. Exactly.
So
So
cool.
you build this up. You build up your melanin stores. And I had a client ask me the other day, he was like, so, I don't really want to tan my skin. Can I get the effects of sunlight without tanning my skin? You can't, to be honest, because this melanin that develops, that is your superpower when it comes to your health, your vitamin D production, and it's also your protection against UVB damage. See, it can go, and you can go on either side of the story. You can go with, you get a sunburn and then your body gets inflamed and has a stress response, or you can pre-program your cells to be able to be in UVB light and then reap the health benefits of UVB, which depletes glucose from the liver, which supports metabolic health, which you produce vitamin D. I mean, it's like insane. It's when I'm in UVB light and it's really strong, I feel like a freaking superhero. I'm like, yes, this is like so amazing. Your energy production, the easy water around your cells, it's like boom, blows it up because of the vitamin D. You're charging your battery. It's like you can tell that's my favorite light, huh?
I think that's also my favorite. I don't know. I think it's a tie because I am also from New York where it is in our DNA that we are obsessed with being tan. And
Yeah.
it's like there's always been this obsession with being tan. And then what I started realizing, Heather, is the more I'm learning about light, I have a whole story that I like tell on every podcast about like my health journey and I had PCOS and blah 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 and lost the gained weight and whatever and then I realized it was my blood sugar, my insulin and I fixed that and I have this whole story that I tell and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, under this entire story there's a story about light."
Yeah.
My whole life I struggled with my weight. And
Yeah.
until I went to school I did my undergrad in Baltimore, so I was still up north.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I moved to Miami and I was literally outside by the pool every single day tanning. And I effortlessly lost all the weight that I could never lose my entire
No,
life. Yes.
that's
I got
awesome.
down to 102 pounds. Like I'm only 5 feet tall. I think you're only 5 feet tall. So we're
I am.
little. You
Yeah.
can't tell here on this podcast. So we're actually 5'9" each. No. Um, no, so I mean, I got down to 102 pounds and it was like, I was also not eating well, but I was tan. And then
Uh-huh.
I moved back to New York City in 2014, and that's when I started eating paleo, but that's when I started gaining weight again. It's when I moved. And it was like all of a sudden I moved from Miami to New York City, and
Yeah.
my health took a real bad turn for the worse, and I started gaining weight again. And then I moved back to Miami, but I at that point they had gotten to me and it's like sun tanning is not good for you. So I didn't tan. And so
Yeah.
it took me much longer to lose the weight. And
Yeah.
went on prescriptions. Then I did pescatarian for a period of time. And now I'm thinking Jack Cruz, I'm thinking the DHA, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, there's something to this. And
Yeah.
then, but then, yeah, it was just like a whole, and then I did keto and that helped. But like, in the background, there's this whole story of light, and especially this UV light, this UVB light that is just like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe that the tanner I am, the thinner I am. So it's like a thing that's really closely connected. And Yeah. So super interesting.
It's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Huge thing. And it doesn't matter, the color of your skin. Everybody's skin can darken.
Hmm.
And the reason why, like say, for example, in the tropics, the skin color tends to be darker because there's the UVB light is so strong. They have they've got melanin.
Natural sunscreen.
They've got natural sunscreen built in,
Hmm.
and these individuals are designed to actually need and be in stronger UVB light all year round.
Yeah.
And we see, as we can move anywhere, today, typically, some people.
Hmm.
And so when we change the light story, because literally just our complexion, our this isn't a racist thing. This is a nature DNA biological thing,
Hmm.
is that our skin color reflects how much light we need to be getting.
Yes.
And there's a Fitzpatrick scale. One is like,
Pasty.
Caucasian pale, and like, 6 is like Kenyan. Okay. And
Hmm.
so the higher up you get, actually the more UVB light you need in order to sustain and support your health.
Yes.
And I want to say this also, there's a trick here, that if you're just starting with your Sunlight RX practice, like when I started and I'm like a Fitzpatrick 1 or 2, I was outside for hours at a time. And I needed that in the beginning of my healing when I was first starting my Sunlight RX practice. Today, I still need a lot of sunlight to maintain my health, but I don't need as much because my body has had it's more in balance.
Hmm.
It's more in balance, and my indoor light environment is much better than it was. And so um, you will get to a point where you don't need as much. Like, you don't need to go balls to the wall with your Sunlight RX exposure, especially if you're lower on the Fitzpatrick like you and I. There'll be a point in time where you can get less out, but your body in the beginning, oh, it's going to be like a sponge. You can't get enough because you've been in this deficiency state for so long.
Yeah.
So, um, I want to mention that because I feel like that's not talked about as much, and it's an important part to understand. If you are higher on the Fitzpatrick, you need more UVB light.
Yes.
Your body is designed for that, and it just from a biological standpoint, you know.
Yeah, that's so important, and I'm so glad you brought that up. I was going to bring it up if you didn't. So, because we can't have this conversation about UV and not talk about our skin differences because they are, like you said, they're representative of how much light that we need. So, I had someone from Ireland message me and she's like, it's so cloudy here all the time. Like, it's super cloudy. I'm like, guess what? You're in luck. You probably have extremely pale skin and do not need that much UV. Like, how much UV can you get? Not a
Yeah,
lot before you start burning.
yeah,
So, do all the things. I'm sure this person who's messaging me can probably get tanner than they've ever imagined they could.
100%.
But doing all the things where we're preconditioning the skin, getting gradually increasing amounts of UVB
Yeah.
during the day, conditioning our skin. Then once we get that tan, I was talking to my brother today, and he's like, "Oh, I totally agree with what you said on your Instagram because I mean, when I'm super dark in the summer, he's like, I never need to put on sunscreen. I can be outside all day and I'm surfing and all this stuff, and it's because you get that tan and that's that natural sunscreen. It's protecting
Yes.
our body from the
Yes.
UVB. And then the
Mm.
other piece I just wanted to mention is how as the sun starts going down in the evening, the blue light content is going down, the UV index is going down, and it's super high in red and infrared, which again is like a giant red light therapy panel for our bodies. So if we need
Yeah.
to think about it in terms of modern stuff,
Yeah.
we're getting that soothing light on our skin. So can you talk a little bit more about that piece?
Sure. Um, I'll say one more thing because I think it kind of goes into what you were just saying.
Sure.
Um, this gradual release of cortisol as we move towards the apex, the sun moves towards its apex. As you get to the apex, which is when the UVB starts to come out, the amount of cortisol you've gradually built up in your bloodstream in that time acts as a natural sunscreen, which is also why if you just go out at noon, you will burn because you haven't had this gradual build of cortisol in your bloodstream. Cortisol is known as a stress hormone, and this UVB is a stressor. It's a stressor in a way to the body, unless you have built your cortisol stores gradually over time. Then there's UVB, and it's like, oh, this actually isn't a stressor. My body can use it in a therapeutic, medicinal context when we go about our sunlight practice in that way. So I felt like that was important to
Yeah.
mention
Super
as you start
interesting.
your practice. And so then the sun is going back down. It's descent. It's on its descent, and cortisol is gradually tapering off as you're mentioning. And then you see the sunset, and there's something that our biology is hardwired to. When the sun um, goes above the horizon and goes below the horizon, these are two huge turning points in our physiology in the day. Over the horizon, it's like, okay, cortisol, here we go, productivity, we're going to get things done, we need energy for our day.
I'm gonna go
And
hunt.
then sunset, we're going down, it's like, okay, no more cortisol, melatonin, rest, digest, heal, repair. And this is a huge transition time in the day for your physiology. And so even if you can't see the sunset going, below the horizon where you live, just by being outside, the sky, the color changes. It's darkening. You're witnessing it, whether you can see the sunset or not. And as your body witnesses that, it's a huge transition point hormonally. It's like, okay, cortisol's done. 3 to 4 hours after sunset, it's full on melatonin, unless you're watching Netflix without any, red glasses on. Then you're going to create a totally opposite scenario than what nature is providing you with. And, there have been studies now showing that just by looking at artificial blue light, you can get type 2 diabetes and obesity. It's absolutely insane. When they're showing it like that, it's like, okay,
There's
it's
something
like,
here.
there's
Yeah.
something here,
Yeah.
right?
Without
Yeah,
any sugar in your mouth, you can develop
exactly.
type 2 diabetes just
Yeah.
from blue light, which comes out of white light bulbs,
Yes.
especially the LED light bulbs, which are the only ones they sell. And they
Yeah.
come out of our devices and a lot of just things around. Like the
Yeah.
dishwasher has a blue light, and this has a
Oh,
little green light, and this has a blue light on it. It's like everything has these freaking lights. I
everything does.
walk
You open
around with
your door.
my tape and I put red tape over everything.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yep. So,
Take everything to protect your melatonin.
yes.
Because you protect your melatonin that you built up in UVA, then you sleep better and you heal and repair. And any cells that were like broken or damaged during the day,
Hmm.
either get thrown out or they get repaired. So you either do apoptosis or autophagy when you're sleeping because of melatonin.
Yes.
And don't mess that up by if you want to watch Netflix, whatever. My wife is like, she loves movies and that sort of thing. And you have to find a meeting place. It doesn't mean just like throw everything out. I'm a big fan of, we have to stay connected with our people while integrating these practices into our lives.
Hmm.
So we wear red blue blocking glasses when we want to watch something at night, and we have Ethernet. We're total dorks in this way, but it works and it helps to sustain the relationships in my life by not being dogmatic but being creative.
Hmm.
And I cannot stress that enough, because people can hear this information and they'll be like, I have to move to the tropics, or I have to, babe, you can't do this
Yeah.
anymore. And it's like, whoa, they have no idea what you're talking about. You know what I'm saying? They're like, whoa, we're suddenly here we go with one
It's
of
like,
Heather's
okay, we're
new,
pioneers now. Like, I didn't sign up
yeah,
for this. Yeah.
right, you
Yeah.
know?
So,
So, but just know there are ways to make it work
hmm
and like maintain your connections in the world and in life, and try not to be dogmatic with it, because that's a trap.
yeah. Yeah. I love that you're talking about that. I love, uh, Sarah Kleiner always says, don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. And that
Mm,
idea that we want to be consistent as we can, as possible, but not to like stress is also going to cause a rise of cortisol and it's going to dysregulate things. So if something is stressing us out, it's not helping our health.
yeah,
So we want to get to a place where these things are like pulling out my blue blockers or leaving my house with my blue blockers. If I know I'm going to be out past sunset, that's a
yeah,
non-negotiable for me. So
yeah,
that's an easy fix. Just get that orange lens, blue blocking glasses. You're good to go. You know,
yes,
is it 100% perfect? No, it's not. But is it better? Yes, it is.
yeah,
Well, like it's still supporting these circadian rhythms, all the hormonal changes that you're mentioning, all these repair processes that have to be done at
yeah,
night.
yeah,
And just that idea that like I see why people in a modern world are so afraid of the sun and feel so damaged by the sun. It just makes so much sense to me now knowing how important every single step, every single hour of these 24 hours, like
yeah,
when we are rising with the sun, getting the early morning light, like preconditioning our skin, getting the UVB, getting the sunset light, like all that red light on our body, letting the cortisol come down and having that high melatonin that's going to encourage all these repair processes.
yeah,
If we're not doing that, we're not sleeping well, we're stressed out all the time, so we're
yeah,
not repairing from the damage that UVB light is doing. So it's no wonder. So if you live in a modern lifestyle and
yeah,
you are only able to get outside at 12 noon for an hour, I'm not saying
yeah,
don't do it, but I'm saying like start with 1 minute, start with 2 minutes. Like if that's
yeah,
the only thing you can do, you have to
yeah,
go really slowly because
yeah,
it's like we have to be smart about this and just know all the like I just keep thinking like in the circle, like this whole entire day, all of these pieces are so important to this whole piece of like this holistic health
yeah,
because we can't just take one piece of it and then be a stress case and we're not sleeping well and then we're not repairing from the damage that was done and that's not going to be helpful for us either. So
yeah,
little bits of these things can go a long way. And a lot of people will ask like, well, how long do I need to be outside in this light?
yeah.
That's a question that I get a lot. So what's your answer to that?
That's a question I get a lot as well. It's
Yeah.
probably the most common, most, popular question. Well, okay, this varies on how sick you are. It varies on, what's your Fitzpatrick, and and what's your latitude? Where do you live? So, okay, we need to consider those three things. And then I'll give you a minimum dosage for no
Mhm.
matter where you live,
Yeah.
which would be 30 minutes in each spectrum would be a minimum dosage that I would suggest to even start to get some therapeutic benefits from sunlight. And especially in the beginning of your practice, this is a case where the more is better. But always listen to your body. If you get overheated, if start developing symptoms, like back off and taper your practice. You have to listen to your body when you're starting to do this. And the longer you're able to be in sunrise light, the better equipped you'll be to handle UVA and UVB without any stressful side effects. That's
Mhm.
really across the board something I've found over the 10 plus years of doing this.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
Great answer. That's a great answer. One of the things I heard from Sarah Pugh, who's brilliant, and she's going to be coming on the podcast soon. But Sarah was like, when people ask me, like, what's the minimum amount of time to go outside? She's like, I like to flip it and say, so like, is like 5 minutes enough for sunrise? And it's like, okay, like, is 5 minutes enough to get outside? And then maybe like 10 minutes later in the day, it's like, okay, so that leaves 23 hours and 45 minutes indoors.
That's
Right?
good.
So, like,
Yeah.
it's just such an eye-opening thing when we think about how much time we're
Yeah.
spending indoors versus outdoors.
Yeah.
So, and also like you said, the sicker you are, so like the more at the beginning of this practice you are, the
Yeah.
longer you will need that light to get really synced up. But you
Yeah.
and I, who have been doing this for some time now, like
Yeah.
I basically can, if I had to, just like open the window, kind of like look outside for a little bit, keep the window open in the kitchen that faces east. And that could be okay for me for that day. Is that going to be what I do as a practice all the time? No. But for me, because my circadian rhythm is quite strong, because I practice that all the time, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, we can get a little bit more leeway,
Yeah.
perhaps, in what we're doing because we've built up that,
Exactly.
we've built up that system and we've built up those strong rhythms that just need that like little, yep, I know what to do. I do this every morning. I got it, got it, got it. So, but
Right.
if you're building that from scratch because your rhythms are totally off, like your melatonin's too high and your cortisol is like
Yeah.
super high in the morning or way too low or spiking at the wrong times, we need to train it to be like ingrain that rhythm into these systems, and for that we need more time outside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I just want to say, if you're afraid of UVB light,
Mm-hmm.
all of the studies done on UVB light have been done indoors under fake UVB light. There have been zero studies released on UVB light, sunlight coming from sunlight and causing health issues like cancer. Zero. Literally zero. It's
That's
like so stupid, right? It's so
that's
insane.
so crazy. That's like
Yeah,
such a crazy thing to say. It's like
yeah,
to make that leap to the sun,
yeah,
which also contains huge amounts of healing infrared light and red light and all this visible light and the different UV spectrums. It is not just UVB. So,
yeah,
like, we have had an entire conversation for an hour and 8 minutes at this point, talking about the entirety of
yeah,
sunrise and then darkness. Darkness is important too. So,
yeah,
if we're just looking at one narrow band of something that would never occur in nature, it's not
yeah,
surprising that there's going to be issues there. And then, like we said, we're living in this like totally modern lifestyle. We are super divorced from nature, and
yeah,
we go outside one time and get sunburned or slather on this like
yeah.
toxic sunscreen that blocks all UVB, like all vitamin D production.
Right.
Like sunscreen completely blocks that conversion for
Mhm.
the vitamin D.
Yeah,
So we're just doing ourselves so much of a disservice by like listening to the advice that they have, but also then just like we also just don't want to be reckless with this either. Like I cover my face after some time that I'm outside. I'll use a hat. I just bought this thing to put on my beach chair that I sit with in the backyard to cover my face. Like I'm not trying to look like an old lady, like, but
yeah,
I also do want a little bit of light on my face. Like I do. I don't care. I want a little bit of tan on my face. I want it on my whole body,
yeah,
even more because I think there's benefits in that. Like, yeah, I do.
yeah.
Love it.
I think that's good. And um, uh, less or something I'll say about the vitamin D thing is that if you're taking a supplement and you go get your vitamin D levels checked, that is artificially inflated, and you cannot take that reading seriously. And it takes, after your last dose of vitamin D, the half-life of vitamin D is pretty long for a supplement.
Mm.
So you need to wait at least a bare minimum of 1 month after taking your last vitamin D supplement before going to get your levels checked. And honestly, I would wait a few months, but that would be the minimum.
Yeah, the
Because that,
half-life is approximately 2 months, it says
yes,
via.
there you go.
Wow,
Yeah,
interesting. I didn't
yeah,
even know that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you want to wait to test your vitamin D levels again to get a more accurate reading, because if you've been supplementing and you go and you're like, oh, mine's 84, it's not, for
Yeah.
one. And for two, if your vitamin D is 84 and you still have blood sugar issues or other health issues, then it's probably not really 84. Like that's,
Mm,
there has to be a core, there has to be
yeah.
some connection here. And if there's a disconnect between your vitamin D and how you're really feeling, then it's likely that it's artificially inflated, and we have to take that into consideration, because most doctors today prescribe vitamin D supplements, and there's so much damage to that it's not even fair. And that's a different episode, but there's a lot of damage that can be done by taking a vitamin D supplement.
Can you quickly rattle off a little bit
Yeah,
if you have a
sure.
couple minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So, um, so one thing is that um, many people today have taken prescription medications for some sort of infection,
Hmm.
ear infection, sore throat, whatever. We've taken stuff like, antibiotics and whatnot.
Antibiotics.
But when we're exposed to these type of bacteria and take some sort of suppressive therapy like that,
Hmm.
um, it latches onto our cell receptor sites. And we have to understand that vitamin D has a receptor site that it attaches to. And so when we take all these heaps of vitamin D, and as modern people, we have this past experience with suppressive therapies, there's nowhere for that vitamin D to latch and attach to on our cell receptor sites when we have had this experience. And this is in a supplement form. It's different because in sunlight it's a different form of vitamin D than what you're taking in a pill.
Mm.
And so when we build up these heaps of like vitamin D from a supplement, like you just like 2 months, that's a half life, and that's a long time to be in your system.
Yeah.
Well, the more vitamin D you take, it builds up and it actually causes a toxicity, and you can develop symptoms because there's nowhere for that vitamin D to attach to. And so what happens is people start to develop Hashimoto's and autoimmune symptoms for this. This is one reason why that happens. So it can be a very dangerous practice, and I don't know if somewhere along the line in medical doctors they know this, and that's why they started to. It's not common for medical doctors to suggest supplements. Why we want to question, like, why did they start to suggest vitamin D? I'm
Mm.
maybe I'm looking into it too much, but it's weird. And also there's a huge side effect long term from taking and large amounts of vitamin D. It's not uncommon for even holistic health practitioners to recommend very large doses of vitamin D in supplemental form, or even intravenous dosage. And there's a lot of side effects with regard to the thyroid and autoimmune symptoms. And actually, there's some good um, info out there on this subject. Um, uh, so that's what I would say in like a nutshell of
Yeah.
one reason I am like
Wow.
very anti vitamin D supplementation.
Wow. Would you say that something like, let's say, cod liver oil could be something someone might take
Yeah, I
instead?
think that's much better. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely, because then like even like vitamin D from food, vitamin D from cod liver oil, you're not just getting vitamin D in like a
And
synthetic form,
synthetic. Yeah.
you know? You're getting
Yeah.
all these other nutrients that are needed to absorb and assimilate it and use it and so
Mhm.
forth. But you're not getting that in a vitamin D supplement, and
Okay.
I'm sure the supplement's rancid anyway, so
Yeah.
vitamin D is like that. It's a hormone. You can wreck your hormones by taking too much vitamin D. Most people don't know vitamin D is
Yeah.
is a hormone. It's a
Yeah.
steroid hormone, and
Wow.
you could cause major issues with your hormones by taking too much vitamin D.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I stopped recommending vitamin D supplementation, and that is one of the major reasons why I'm like, oh my gosh, we have no choice but to really get the bulk of this from the sun. And how do we do that safely in our modern environment? And that's what this whole episode was. So that was such a great wrap up. I feel like we really like we did such a good job of filling the whole day and night and talking about timing and this was so great, Heather. Thank you so much for taking the time today. I know this was an extra long episode. So tell people where they can find you, how they can work with you, and yeah, I'll link everything in the show
Oh,
notes.
sure. You can visit me at my site, heathershepard.com, and my name is spelled Heathar. You could find me there. You could get a copy of my Sunlight RX, which basically breaks down everything we talked about today on the episode. Or you could book a homeopathic or ancestral diet session with me there, and I often offer courses as well. And you can follow me on Instagram at sunlight_RX.
Love it. We'll link everything in the show notes. And thank you so much again for taking the time to be here. This was such a great and helpful episode. And feel free to reach out to either of us if you are starting to get a tan and you're starting to notice all these great benefits. And definitely look up your Fitzpatrick score. That's something that Heather started mentioning, and it's really helpful to know. And there's also some helpful apps. I love the D Minder app to know how intense the UVB index is. And then also, I don't use it to keep track of my vitamin D. I just use it to know the UV index, how
Yeah.
long I've been out. And then the circadian app is really great to know like when is UVB, when does UVA start, when is the sunrise in my area, because this is something that's, unless you're living at the equator, it's changing basically every day. So yeah, we'll link those in the show notes as well. So thanks again, Heather. Appreciate it.